It's a Wednesday edition of Locked On Grizzlies, and another Grizzlies player has been added to the injury report, this time one Jaren Jackson Jr. Plus, the new offense is on full display early on in training camp. DeMichael Cole, my co-host of the Commercial Appeal as well there in Memphis, Tennessee, is on the ground at Nashville giving us some details, plus how things are shaking out with the assistant coaches early on in training camp. This is Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to another installment of Locked On Grizzlies. It is I, Joe Mullinax, your host for this episode. Notice that I say host, not co-host, because my co-host, DeMichael Cole, the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee, is not with me. He is not in Memphis, Tennessee. He is currently in Nashville, Tennessee, covering Memphis Grizzlies training camp for that publication, and he is not able to be available with us for this installment of Locked On Grizzlies. But fear not, dear listener, dear viewer, I have lots of juicy tidbits for you from training camp, from the work of DeMichael Cole, not just at the Commercial Appeal, but also for us here at Locked On Grizzlies, and I'm excited to share that with you throughout this episode of the show. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by the good folks over at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts as proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. Literally anywhere you get a podcast, you can find Locked On Grizzlies. Become an everydayer if you have not already done so. Make sure that you're checking us out both in audio and visual form. Each and every day, to the best of our ability, DeMichael and I will be putting out episodes, and we hope that you'll be along with or on the ride with us as the 2024-2025 season gets underway. You might notice, dear listener, dear viewer, that I'm a lot cheerier, a lot more chipper than perhaps you thought I would be. Maybe you've been following my career since I was a blogger back in 2011, or maybe you just enjoy Locked On Grizzlies. I'm the guy that yells and DeMichael's the cool one. Wherever your degree of familiarity with me, and maybe this is your first time coming by. In that case, hi, hope you stay a while. Subscribe, right? Maybe you're wondering why I'm in such a good mood. Because DeMichael's not here, and I do admittedly miss DeMichael when he's not here. But again, I've got some good tidbits from Mr. Cole that I'm going to share throughout the show. But the main reason that I would be sad is that the Grizzlies injury bug has bitten the franchise once more. And this time, it's the biggest bite that the Grizzlies have experienced so far this young season that literally just started 2 days ago. Jaren Jackson Jr. apparently tweaks a hamstring, strains it, reportedly, according to the thoughts of one Taylor Jenkins, Memphis Grizzlies head coach. There should be more details today or tomorrow about that, and I'm sure that's something that DeMichael Cole will have greater information about for us on the next couple of episodes of Locked On Grizzlies. If you've been following this team, as I have, and chances are you have at least a little bit, you know that the injuries have been a major concern, a major problem for the franchise. And it feels like, emphasis on feels like, oh no, here we go again. G.G. Jackson, out until December. Vince Williams Jr., out until November. Cam Spencer, on a two-way contract, but still likely out at least for the next couple of weeks. And now you've got Jaren Jackson Jr., who is easily the biggest name of the four, who is easily the most important for Memphis Grizzlies' success this season. A guy who's a former Defensive Player of the Year, a guy who should benefit from Zach Edey being there, allowing him to go back to his more natural position at the power forward spot. We are looking at a player in Jaren Jackson Jr. who is arguably the best two-way player the Memphis Grizzlies have, combining both offensive scoring and execution on that area of the floor with his defensive acumen. Why am I not more panicked? Well, not to be a smart aleck, but it's October 2nd, right? Look at your calendar, look on your phone, look on your computer, wherever you are listening, watching. I'll wait. Find a calendar and check it. If you're driving while listening, please don't do that, right? Just trust me that it's October 2nd, but everybody else check the calendar. I'll wait a couple seconds. See, it's October 2nd. Now, look up when the Grizzlies play their first basketball game for the season. I'll wait. If you're driving, please don't look. I'll tell you. It's October 23rd, dear listener, dear viewer. That is Memphis Grizzlies opening night. That is when they are to be expected to have a basketball game against an opposing team that actually matters. Opening night is roughly 3 weeks away. What in the world are we talking about? I understand the need to panic a little bit. Don't get me wrong. Nobody likes a good freak out more than me, right? I freak out all the time. I freak out about things like John Conchar and call him white rice. I panic when I think that Marcus Smart is going to play more point guard than I think he should. I'm almost always down for a good panic session. But Jaren Jackson Jr. having a soft tissue injury, a muscular issue. If this was a knee and they had to get imaging on a knee, ligament kind of stuff, I'd be freaking out. If this was more joint related, a sprain, something where it could be a fracture of a bone, crap. They were able to diagnose it relatively quickly, and they are acknowledging that as things get heated up in training camp, as the intensity rises, as these guys get back into the swing, you see this kind of stuff pop up almost all the time. Now, we're selfishly, because it's almost certainly, knowing how the Memphis Grizzlies handle their injuries, I'd be surprised if we see Jaren Jackson in the preseason. Would I be surprised if he's not there opening night? Yeah, I would be surprised. Even if it is a strain or a hamstring pull, 2 to 3 weeks, depending on severity, that sounds about right. So I expect him to be there opening night, obviously willing to withhold full judgment until we get the full diagnosis of what's going on with him. He is going to get imagery on that hamstring, but Taylor Jenkins didn't sound too concerned based off of DeMichael's writings over the commercial appeal. This is a bummer because you want to see him out there with Zach Edey. We haven't had that chance yet. You're right? You want to see him being in that position to have that freedom back defensively. You want to see how he fits into this new look offense that we're going to talk more about and where his role might change compared to what he's done in the past. That is what I'm most bummed out in. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to eventually see it. One of the positives of the Memphis Grizzlies not having a ton of roster overturn is Jaren and Ja have played a decent amount of basketball together. Not as much as you'd like, obviously, but they've played. Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane have played a lot of basketball together. Even going along with guys like Jaren Jackson Jr. and Brandon Clark. You have seen Jaren alongside numerous key contributors. And Jaren logged a ton of minutes last year for this team. He was one of the biggest beneficiaries of this lost season that Memphis completed last year because he found himself offensively. He found ways to improve his best assist percentage numbers of his career. Isolation scoring being such a point of growth for him. You saw him get better. Obviously, you want to see that chemistry continue to be kindled, and there's nothing like an NBA game, even a preseason game. It's hard to simulate that in practice, right? There's a different energy. There just is. So that's a bummer. But Jaren suffering this type of injury in the ramp up to the regular season is not something that I'm overly concerned about. I think he's going to be okay. Now, I withhold my right, or I hold on to my right to freak out later if I want, because I love to freak out. But I'm not freaking out yet. I don't think you should freak out yet either. It's a chance for Santi Aldama to get some run with that starting unit. Looking forward to seeing Santi and how he can provide some spacing next to Edey. There's opportunity to make chicken salad out of chicken you-know-what. But if you are panicked a little bit, I get it. We've gone through some stuff the last 18 months together, right? I think we're going to be okay. This is not one that I'm necessarily as worried about as maybe others are. Let me know in the comments if you disagree. Hit me up on X at Joe Mullinax. We can talk about it more here on Locked On Grizzlies. Looking forward to chatting with you. By all means, hit me up. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. I'm a big fan of FanDuel, and you should be as well. NFL fans out there, the season has gotten underway, and you can continue this season's strong start with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So if you get a hunch this weekend, maybe you're watching the amazing Washington Commanders, the first place in the NFC East, Washington Commanders, and you think, you know what, I could see Jaden Daniels going for 3 touchdowns. I hear Joe Mullinax talking a lot about how great Jaden Daniels is. In the middle of the game, you can go and check out whether I'm full of it or not in the latest stats. Plus, you can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same exact page where you make a bet. That is how FanDuel gets it done. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You heard me right, $200 bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Check out FanDuel.com. Again, that is FanDuel.com. Moving on from the depression that is Jaren Jackson Jr.'s injury, right? Because that can take you to a dark place. Don't get me wrong. I want to stress. I get it. There's reasons for optimism, though. And DeMichael Cole has written a ton of great pieces over at the Commercial Appeal, not just through Media Day, but also obviously training camp getting started, all sorts of great takeaways and insights. DeMichael rocks. This piece over at the Commercial Appeal, more ball movement and cuts, first day insight on the new look Memphis Grizzlies offense. This is a fun read, and I like this read for a number of reasons. Number one, again, if you followed my career for a while, I'm Joe Mullinax, remember. If you have followed my work, especially here on Locked On Grizzlies, this is a relatively new development. Taylor Jenkins has replaced his coaching staff, all but 2 of them, right? And we'll talk more about the different roles and what these guys are doing later. The change is heavily offensive because Taylor Jenkins is a defensive coach first and foremost. So a lot of the changes that are being anticipated are offensive in nature. And what have I said, dear listener, dear viewer, for the last couple of years, since I have been a Locked On Grizzlies podcast co-host with the wonderful DeMichael Cole? I have said versatility. I have said variety. It's the spice of life. And I oftentimes get tired of seeing 2 dudes run a 2-man game pick and roll with 3 guys standing off to the side in a 2-on-2 isolation set. Sometimes it looked like that was the best option the Memphis Grizzlies had, and sometimes that is going to be the best option. Ja Morant is a dude. Desmond Bane is a dude. Jaren Jackson Jr. is a dude. And when you've got dudes that can compete and do things at a higher level than most other basketball players on the planet, sometimes you give them the ball and get the heck out of the way. But the funny thing about the National Basketball Association is most of these other teams also have dudes. And you have to have answers for when that stuff that you're trying in the 2-man game and a pick and roll and isolation scoring doesn't work. It seemed at times that was absent from the Grizzlies these last couple of years. And in the early returns, again, it's literally been 1 day of practice, a day where Jaren Jackson Jr. got it hurt. In 1 day of practice, it sounds like there has been some interesting developments. First and foremost, and again, this is from the piece by DeMichael, freeing up Ja Morant. I have literally been saying this for years. Ja Morant is your best basketball player. Having the ball in the hands of your best basketball player makes sense, don't get me wrong. Also makes sense from the standpoint of him being your best creator of offense for others. Ja is unselfish. He tries to get other guys going on a night in, night out basis. Those are all great traits to have. A lot of times, and I used to say this about Marc Gasol years ago, the best play for Ja Morant is his play. The best opportunity for the Memphis Grizzlies to score is when Ja Morant is the one doing the scoring. Him being off ball more and leaning into the fact that Desmond Bane has facilitation experience. Marcus Smart, for all of his flaws as a primary creator of offense, as a secondary or tertiary one, third option to be a facilitator, sign me up, man. That I'm on board with because those guys are in a position where they have experience doing it and they're not the main threat. Ja Morant off the ball is a problem because they're talking about more cuts to the basket, getting guys moving backdoor towards the rim. Sign me up because Ja Morant's one of the best athletes in the NBA, and there are not many guys that can hang with that dude in terms of getting into space and finding ways to utilize it to his advantage. Let's find different ways to do that, though. Let's find different ways to get him involved in the offense as a scorer, as a creator of offense for others. The defense is going to collapse on a slashing Ja Morant. Kick it out to the corner to Luke Kennard or some other guy that can shoot like a Santi Aldama, and hopefully a Santi Aldama. With Jaren Jackson Jr. out for the foreseeable future, more than likely. Get that guy moving around the court. Ja Morant is a problem for every NBA defense because you have to account for him. If he's at the point all the time and you know he's running a two-man game waiting for a high screen on the pick and roll, that is predictable. I'm not an offensive or defensive mastermind basketball-wise, but I can watch enough tape to see that's what the Grizzlies do when things get tough. And yeah, Ja Morant's one of the top 10 or 15 best on the planet. But if you scheme it and you're using your length and your size and your athleticism, whatever your team's got, you can take away that first option and what comes next. What comes next if Ja's not going to have the ball in his hands? When he's playing off ball, there's ways to get the ball in his hands. And if they over pursue or over help to Ja's side, now there's somebody else open that can have one of those other creators getting the ball there for them. Or sometimes that other creator is going to be the one that has the open shot. I love the idea of Ja Morant off the ball. That frees him up to do so many things. Pace continues to be critical, and that's not anything new, right? The Grizzlies have been doing that kind of stuff for a long time. The idea of being able to get out in space, run around, move, all that sort of stuff. That's not new. They want to create offense in that way. Good for them. They have to keep that energy because they're still not going to be the best three-point shooting team in the NBA. They're still not going to be the most efficient offense in terms of half-court scoring. They just don't have the personnel for that to consistently be among the tops in those lists. So you want them to have the self-awareness enough to say we still have to keep pace up. We still got to run. We still got to get out and transition because that's one of the things that the Grizzlies have done so well offensively. But once they get into those half-court sets, the Ja Morant off-ball stuff is very promising. Talking about Zach Edey being a creator off of dribble handoffs and short passes. That is also promising because that is something that hasn't really been tapped into with Zach Edey, going back to his days at Purdue. And DeMichael talks about it in his piece. Again, if you're not subscribed to the Commercial Appeal for DeMichael Cole's work, you're crazy. You need to subscribe. In this article, DeMichael talks about how Zach Edey has said, you're going to see aspects of his game that you haven't seen before because at Purdue, he wasn't asked to be that guy. They didn't need him to be a passer because what they wanted Zach Edey to do was get down on the block and go to work. The Memphis Grizzlies don't need him to do that. They have other choices. They have Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr. when healthy, Ja Morant, Luke Kennard is a three-point shooter. Brandon Clark is a short roller and a floater shooter, a shooter of floaters. They have guys that can score the ball in a variety of ways. And while they're going to ask Edey to do that sometimes, that doesn't have to be his main focus. He can prioritize other aspects of his game. And because of the size of the guy, he's going to have screens that he sets that are so impactful, he's going to have room to operate. What does he do with that room? Do I need him to shoot elbow jumpers? Absolutely not. To be honest with you, I don't need him to go down to the block and get the ball thrown to the hand more than once or twice a game. I need him to screen, be able to set his feet, and make reads based off of defensive rotations. Because there are better offensive options than Zach Edey. And if he can find those guys based off of the space that he creates with his frame and his screen setting, that is a win for me and to me. I can't wait to see Zach Edey pass. I can't wait to see Ja Morant off ball. I can't wait to see this new look offense. I wish we could see it with Jaren Jackson Jr., and maybe we will. Again, we'll get more details on the injury here later. But I am very interested. Consider me intrigued with what this Grizzlies offense is going to be capable of doing as they get more comfortable with it. We don't have to see it all at once. It's going to be a work in progress. It's going to take time, but it's an interesting process that has started with Memphis. And one of the storylines of the year is going to be how that progresses. It's going to be really interesting to watch play out. I'm looking forward to watching it, and I'm sure you are as well. Before you watch anything else after Locked On Grizzlies has concluded, you should be checking out Locked On NBA. It's a small town feel of a show, lots of great personality, covering every aspect of the league. Everybody's back now, right? Media days are over. Training camp has begun. Locked On NBA has you covered with all the different teams and all the different franchises and all the different ways to interact with the NBA. So once Locked On Grizzlies is done, make sure you're checking out Locked On NBA. You won't regret it. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is a wonderful partner with me when it comes to partnering up my goal of getting memories made with my family and purchasing tickets. Sports, music, theater, comedy, it doesn't matter. I love all of it, and Gametime helps me go to whichever one of those myself and my family want to make memories at. Go and check out the app right now. Toggle the all-in pricing. That's one of my favorite features. And again, you have to turn it on to use the feature. But once you have that on, it shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. I don't like surprises. I don't know about you. Seat views. I love that I can check out exactly what I'm going to be looking at from my seat, thanks to a panoramic view in the app before you make a purchase. And the lowest price guarantee from Gametime means that they will credit you 110% of the difference if you can find a lower price. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime, baby. You better believe it. We're going to close out this episode of the show talking about these new coaches. And again, DeMichael Cole wrote a great piece. Memphis Grizzlies coach Taylor Jenkins offers insight on revamped assistant coaching staff and their roles. All of these coaches are new on this staff except for two. Only two bench assistants stayed, which is remarkable when you think about it. That is a ton of overturn, okay? Patrick St. Andrews, Anthony Carter. Those are the two coming back from last year's staff. Andrews' goal was to overhaul the half-court offense. Mixed reviews on that so far. And then you have Anthony Carter, who Gigi Jackson has given a ton of credit for his ability to help him develop his three-point shot. Seems to have the gist of player development. Those two guys stuck around. Everybody else was replaced. And the roles vary, right? Like Tomas Lasalo, who was the head coach of Paris basketball in Europe. Taylor Jenkins has lauded his offensive mind. Jenkins in DeMichael's piece, he's quoted as saying, he's going to help us with our offense. I think he's got a brilliant mind on that side of the floor. He is the lead assistant coach. So Lasalo is going to have an amazing opportunity to develop as a coach and also help really kind of orchestrate what this new look offense is going to be. Noah LaRoche, who we've talked about here on the show in the past, player development is a major focus of his. He's worked with NBA players over summers in the past, and he has a unique vision that Taylor Jenkins talks about. Then you have Joe Boylan, familiar with Taylor from his time with the Milwaukee Bucks, but he has a bit of a past in Memphis. He's been a part of the franchise from 2015 to 2018. He's an analytics guy, great kind of background in terms of player development. Jason March, former friend of the old school GBB Live back in the day, promoted after being the head coach of the G League Memphis Hustle. Again, player development. Obviously, he knows players like Gigi Jackson, John Conchar, Vince Williams Jr., Santi Aldama, Jake LaRavia very well. He is going to be a tactical guy, according to Coach Jenkins, going to help on both the offensive and defensive sides of the court. Then they have Patrick Mutombo. Rest in peace to Dikembe Mutombo. Patrick is not related to the 18-year NBA player and Hall of Famer, as DeMichael points out in his piece. He's a tactical guy focusing on basketball strategy, scouting, practice design, working with players in small groups. And then Eric Schmidt was a former video coordinator who is involved in player development. So 6 new coaches, brand new to the staff, and the new perspective on what ails the Memphis Grizzlies is one of the things I'm most interested in watching unfold as the season goes on. Because the offense was bad, right? Bad when the team wasn't healthy, below average when the team was healthy. And I mentioned earlier in the show the get out of Ja's way, 2-man game, set him a pick, watch him cook. We can't have that as your only means of late scoring. It can't be that lazy. You can't have guys standing around watching. Variety's the spice of life, I said. And I say it again. Give me some off-ball screens. Give me some guys cutting to the basket. Give me some guys moving around the two-man game, setting additional picks, looking for space as it collapses on a Zach Edey or Ja Morant to not just stand there in the corner waiting for the basketball, but have a chance to get into rhythm running off of another off-ball screen. Give me guys that are cutting weak side off of a strong side pick and roll action. I want more movement. I want to see guys that are actively participating in scheme. I didn't see that enough last year. Part of it was the team was not healthy. Part of it was they were bad. Part of it was guys weren't around long enough to learn the scheme. This is the time of year to do that. I understand. How you get these guys to move around Ja Morant. He is the sun. All of these other guys need to be in his orbit. Some of them are going to be closer to his orbit than others. How do you maximize what Ja Morant is as a threat offensively? That matters immensely to what the Memphis Grizzlies are going to be this season. And these assistant coaches seem to have a vibe where a lot of what they're going to do is going to be on that offensive side of the ball. The defense isn't broken, so why fix it? The personnel selection of Zach Edey, allowing Jaren Jackson Jr. to play off in that free safety weak side help role again, the one that won him Defensive Player of the Year in part, that's going to help take care of some of these problems defensively. And they were a good defensive team, even with all the injuries. The scheme and the execution and the coaching is sound there. But if Memphis really wants to take a leap into championship contention, if they want that to be real, the offense has to improve. And it starts with Morant because of his talent. How do you build around that as a cornerstone of scheme? It can't all be three-point shots. We know they don't have the personnel to do that day in, day out, night in, night out. They have to have the ability to shoot shots for the sake of defensive spacing and getting to the rim. If everybody just collapses, it's going to be a long season. But again, one more time, for the folks in the back, variety is the spice of life. When I watch this offense next week in the first preseason game, I want to see them moving. I want to see them running. I want to see them maintaining that pace while also understanding that there are ways to vary what you do on the half court to keep a defensive team on their heels. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Basketball is a fairly simple game in a lot of ways, but you don't also have to lean so heavily on isolation, screen setting at the point of the attack, the on-ball defender trying to get them moved out of the way. You're wasting three other guys who can help in the offensive process, when you do that. It sounds like more than ever before, they are leaning towards getting Ja Morant involved in different ways, using Zach Edey in a unique way compared to what he was used for in college. That is going to pay dividends. And it might be a struggle early on with the new offensive scheme and with the new assistants, with a new message. It might be a slow start, but the long-term benefits. Are we trying to win a championship or not? Memphis gets to the dance. All they need is a ticket, like the playoffs, finding a way to get in. Once they're there, hopefully that offense is clicking on all cylinders come the spring. Obviously, we got a ways to go and a lot of basketball to watch and see be played, before that happens. Thank you so much for being with me on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. This is my last episode for the week. I've got a couple of busy nights coming up, so I will not be with you for the Thursday or Friday editions of the show. Don't fret, though, because DeMichael Cole will be with you. Again, he's on the ground there in Nashville. All the takeaways from Grizzlies practice, updates on Jaren Jackson Jr., and so much more, I'm sure, are coming from DeMichael in the days ahead. So I will be back with you guys on Monday, but DeMichael will be with you for a Thursday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Make sure you're checking that out. And make sure you're checking out Locked On NBA when this show concludes over on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, literally anywhere you can get Locked On Grizzlies, you can find Locked On NBA. Make them your second watch or your second listen. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out, all the different places that you can check out Locked On NBA, obviously. Make sure that you are having both audio and visual options. Take DeMichael and I wherever you go as the season begins here for Locked On Grizzlies. Thank you so much again for joining me on this episode. I am Joe Mullinax. Stay locked in. Have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Try not to worry too much. Go for a walk. Go bask in the sun. Memphis Grizzlies basketball is back. It's going to be okay. Catch you next.